I would like to welcome everyone to the August 12th, 2021 work session of the Henrico County School Board. Before we begin and seek approval for our agenda, I want to announce publicly that Mrs. Mickey Ogburn will not be present with us today as she's dealing with a family health emergency. So we wish her Godspeed and her family, and so she will not be with us in present, but she will be with us in spirit. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Chair Cooper, I would like to, instead of making a motion to approve of the agenda, I would like to make a motion to move item 5.01, the Henrico County Public Schools Health Committee update, to be our first item on the agenda, since that is what is on top of everybody's mind, so we can focus our first attentions there.
Thank you, Ms. Shea, for that addendum to the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kinsella. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. We will be amending the agenda to address item 5.01, Henrico County Public School Health Committee update first. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. As we've become accustomed to at each and every meeting, our health committee is here and prepared to present updates and health conditions, and today bring us recommendations, health and safety recommendations for your consideration for the upcoming fall 21 school year. So Dr. Tigan is here to begin the presentation. She's joined by Dr. Grant, our Chief of School Leadership, who will talk about some of the school aspects, as well as Robin Gilbert. Dr. Tigan, I'll let you begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Cooper, members of the board, and Dr. Cashwell. This afternoon, we'd like to provide you with an update from the Hcps Health Committee. As we continue to emphasize with our staff, families, and community, we have and will continue to exercise flexibility if or as conditions change. To highlight this nature of rapidly changing conditions, let's take a look back at the changing circumstances and conditions that unfolded between July 21st and today. On July 21st, the Virginia Department of Education and the Virginia Department of Health announced that each local school division would determine how they will implement the COVID-19 prevention strategies based on community conditions and local health recommendations. Also, the release of the updated guidance for pre-K through 12 schools was released. The HCPS team was already working in collaboration with our school board, school leaders, and the Virginia Department of Health partners on next steps for Henrico County Public Schools. At this point in time, the community transmission level was at the moderate level. 4 days later, on July 25th, we saw the expiration of Virginia's public health order. We sent a message to families on July 27th. Key points in this message included HCPS strongly encourages mask wearing in school. Masks are required on school buses due to a current federal order from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention related to methods of public transportation. Reviewed key prevention measures that would be in place for the 21-22 school year. And lastly, we emphasized the frequently changing nature of the COVID-19 pandemic and what that would mean as we continue to exercise flexibility if and as needed based on conditions. Just moments after our message was sent, the CDC released new recommendations for masking. On August 2nd, 2021, the Health Committee met to review this most recent information. At this point, community transmission had climbed to substantial. The decision was to hold another Health Committee meeting this past Monday, August 9th, to continue to discuss the prevention strategies, including mask. In 1 week's time, Henrico had reached the high level of community transmission. I will walk you through the highlights of this past Monday's health meeting. And as we have committed to do throughout the pandemic, our health committee continues to meet regularly, reviews and monitors health data relevant to Henrico and our local Henrico community. When the division first issued our plans related to masking for the fall of 2021, the local health data showed moderate transmission. Recently, we've seen that transmission level change from substantial to high. The Health Committee uses timely, relevant data to drive discussions and recommendation. And the Health Committee recommendations today are based on that most recent data. In addition to monitoring local health conditions, the latest vaccination rates in the area were reviewed. You can see the current vaccination levels for Henrico County on the slide in front of you. Henrico's vaccination rates are high. When compared to other localities, our numbers are strong. This is due to the strong partnership between the Virginia Department of Health, the Richmond Henrico Health District, Henrico County, and the schools. We continue to partner with the Virginia Department of Health and the Richmond Henrico Health District to provide vaccination clinics at schools. Our next vaccination clinic will be held at Brooklyn Middle School from 2 to 4 on Wednesday, August 18th. To assist our families, in addition to the COVID-19 vaccine, rising 7th graders will be able to receive the required Tdap and meningococcal vaccines, and our rising 12th graders will be able to receive the required meningococcal vaccine. Both rising 7th and 12th graders may opt to receive the HPV vaccine as well, but this is not a required vaccine. The COVID-19 vaccine is also available at this event to any of our students 12 years and older. We know how important vaccination is to the prevention and spread of COVID-19 and continue to highly encourage all of who are eligible and able to be vaccinated to get their vaccine without delay. In addition to our scheduled events, our registrars have the Richmond Henrico Health District schedule for immunization events in which these vaccines, as well as all other childhood immunizations, can be obtained. Ms. Gilbert will now share the prevention and mitigation strategies that continue into the new year. Hold on one second, I just want to wait for her.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Board, Dr. Cashwell. I can't say that I'm happy to be back in front of you again. Our numbers are heading in the right direction, but I am confident that what we have done in the past can be replicated and we can have a successful school year. So I would like to present to you today the prevention strategies that we would like to continue. In addition to vaccines, we know how important continued strategies to prevent the spread of COVID-19 is. Let's take a look at our continued and ongoing efforts with these measures. We continue to use procedures that were highly effective when we opened in March of 2021 and throughout our summer academy programming. Those layered preventative measures are shown here on the slide. Daily screenings, our social distancing, our air systems, plexiglass shields that are still available, and protocols for classrooms, seatings, and management of hand hygiene and respiratory etiquette. Contact tracing remains a critical component of our preventative strategy. Our contact tracers are and will continue to meet with our Richmond Henrico Health Department partners a minimum of 3 times a week and more often daily as we need to. All HCPS contact tracers have been, and as they join our team will be, trained through Johns Hopkins contact training course. While HCPS is not requiring COVID vaccinations of our employees or our students, we will consider this in our contact tracing. However, it must be disclosed by the family or the employee. The vaccination status with a verbal assessment of current health status can significantly reduce or eliminate the amount of quarantine time. As with the COVID vaccine, we will not require testing of individuals. What remains critical is that if you are sick, if you are experiencing COVID-like symptoms, stay home. Seating charts will continue to be utilized on our buses, in classrooms, and in the cafeteria to assist us with this contact tracing. HCPS, in accordance with VDH and CDC recommendations, will continue to follow the SICK protocol based on our community transmission. When our community transmission is high, as it is now, an employee or student exhibiting COVID-like illness symptoms will be asked to quarantine for 10 days unless a physician note is provided. Once community transmission lowers, we will lower this quarantine back to our normal 24 hours without symptoms and without the use of medications. School Health Services reviews the data for this pathway for illness symptoms weekly and communicates where we are with transmission and what that requirement for staying home will look like. We communicate that with their leadership as well as their nursing staff. Again, given the CDC updated guidance on vaccinated individuals who are fully vaccinated, which means you have received your full 2 doses of Moderna or Pfizer or your 1 Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and you are 2 weeks post those vaccinations, the use of a mask can significantly reduce your quarantining time if an exposure occurs. Based on current contact tracing protocols for our school settings, wearing masks generally allows a student to avoid quarantine protocols. Additionally, staff and students who are fully vaccinated and have not exhibited COVID-19 symptoms for more than 24 hours would not have to quarantine if exposed to a person with COVID-19. Should a student need to quarantine for exposure to a COVID-19 positive case or illness, students would be provided classwork to be completed at home, as would be the case with other illnesses that we have in our child population. These would include chickenpox, flu, or strep throat. Overall, the best prevention is to be vaccinated. Wear your mask, and please stay home if you are sick. And now Dr. Tigan will share the outcomes from the most recent HCPS Health Committee meeting. Right back, I'm having the same problem you did.
In an effort to keep students and teachers in school and learning, the Health Committee has developed guidance related to mask wearing in schools. It is important to remember that masks are but one layer of prevention. You just heard Ms. Gilbert share about some of the others. Again, given the CDC updated guidance on vaccinated individuals, being fully vaccinated and the use of a mask can significantly reduce your quarantining time if an exposure occurs. The important point here again was to hear vaccinations, wearing masks, and staying home when sick are critical. Henrico County recommends these guidelines to begin next school year. You can see that while masks are predominantly required indoors, there are exceptions in an effort to maintain the continuity of student programs and provide our students with mask break periods. At this time, Dr. Grant will share information about preparations for the new school year.
Good afternoon. In order to provide the safest possible environment during athletic events, Henrico County Public Schools will implement a plan that utilizes numerous preventative strategies. The Athletic Risk Mitigation Plan is comprised of 4 main strategies: social distancing, sanitizing, mask, and record keeping. Prior to attending practice or an athletic contest, athletes were screened for any COVID-19 symptoms. Any athlete who exhibits symptoms should not attend and contact their coach immediately. In locker rooms, athletes will be spaced 3 feet apart from one another. Coaches may need to have athletes dress out in shifts if the locker room cannot accommodate all of the athletes on the team at one time. Coaches will organize players into small groups or pods when possible. This will limit the number of close contacts any one athlete may have while training. Hand sanitizer will be available at both practices and contests. Equipment will be sanitized periodically each day. Masks will be required when athletes travel on buses. Masks are also required indoors for athletes during times when they are not directly involved in exercises or athletic competitions. Athletes will be assigned seats on the buses when traveling to any contest. Attendance will be taken each day at practice in order to help with contact tracing in case of a confirmed positive case. There will be no sharing of food or drinks, and clothing should be washed each day after practice. By following these risk mitigation measures, Henrico County Public Schools will continue to provide a safe and valuable experience for all student athletes. September 8th is fast approaching. We are excited to have a full in-person return for the upcoming school year, keeping with Senate Bill 1303, which requires each district to offer in-person instruction to each student enrolled. As a district, we are committed to ensuring the health and safety of our staff and students. Schools are in the process of updating their safety plans for the upcoming school year and will post on their individual websites. Our instructional program will continue to meet the academic, social, and emotional needs of all students, to include small and whole group instruction, which focus on remediation, enrichment, and intervention. As you recall, in the spring, the Division of Learning presented the board an overview of our literacy and intervention plan for the upcoming school year. Manipulatives, books, digital devices, and other hands-on instructional materials will be encouraged throughout the school day to maximize student engagement. Students and staff will follow best practices and mitigation strategies while utilizing these instructional resources. Students will resume travel throughout the building for targeted instruction, art, music, PE, and library. Students will eat lunch each day in the cafeteria and will not be required to wear masks when eating or drinking. School cafeterias will use the lunch lines once again. Additionally, our schools will incorporate assigned seating in every location of the school, including the cafeteria. Elementary students will have the opportunity to have recess every day. When recess is outdoors, masks will not be required. Volunteers and visitors will have the opportunity to support schools as they did in the spring. The tiered system will continue to be used, which is tied to community transmission levels and based on principal approval. The Division of Learning and School Leadership will update the board on August 26 with detailed information for the 2021-22 school year. In preparation for the 21-22 school year, staff in the Department of Student Support and Wellness formed a summer Re-engagement team comprised of school social workers, attendance officers, and school counselors. Under the direction of Dr. Jan Parrish, the focus of the team's work has been to reconnect families and students to school, provide resources, and to eliminate any barriers that would prevent students from returning to in-person learning on September the 8th. Teams were assigned to each magisterial district. To date, the teams have connected with over 1,000 parents and families. They have been providing essential information for families to return to school, HVA, and re-enrollment process and vaccination requirements. During home visits, teams have provided resources and physical and emotional needs and linked families and communities to resources such as Henrico Mental Health, Henrico Social Services, the department, Henrico Health Department, and private healthcare providers. As we head into the remainder of the summer, the re-engagement teams will continue to connect with families and students and provide resources. At this time, I will turn the presentation back over to Dr. Tigan.
Moving forward, masking protocols will be reviewed during the HCPS Health Committee meetings, and updates and/or recommendations or any changes will be shared publicly at the regularly scheduled school board meetings. At this time, Ms. Gilbert, Dr. Grant, and I are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tigan. Before I entertain questions from my colleagues, I'm turning the mic briefly over to our superintendent.
Thank you, and thank you, Chairman. And to Dr. Tigan, Mrs. Gilbert, and Dr. Grant, I want to thank you for your presentation and all of the committee members and staff members who represent the work of the Health Committee, including one of our school board members, Mrs. Atkins. I know this has been a very busy and active few weeks. I know Dr. Tigan highlighted the rapidly changing nature of events related to local health conditions, CDC guidance, and so on. So they've worked tirelessly over the last 2 weeks, as they have throughout this entire pandemic situation, to advise staff and our board and bring recommendations. So you have, just to summarize for board members, heard the recent recommendations from our health committee that they brought forth today regarding protocols for safety and COVID-19 prevention and mitigation in our schools, which would begin September of this year for our start of our school year, which include layered mitigation, which include contact tracing protocols, including assigned seating, as well as required masking both for vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals. You saw the Health Committee's specific recommendations related to exceptions for that, of course, with individuals who cannot wear a mask safely because of a disability defined by ADA, as well as some circumstances related to outdoor recess, so on and so forth, for extracurricular activities. So we're certainly going to be seeking the board's affirmation and approval of those risk mitigation strategies, including mask wearing. But before we do that, as Dr. Tigan said, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cashwell. I'm going to begin with Ms. Kinsella.
Thank you, Reverend Cooper. And thank you, Dr. Cashwell, for thanking the Health Committee and once again acknowledging Ms. Atkins' service on this committee on behalf of the board. I'd also like to thank, on behalf of my colleagues, all of the folks who reached out and shared feedback, whether it was email, in person, on the phone, online public comment feedback. We heard you, and we appreciate your advocacy so much. I know here in my district, I know we've learned so much in the Brooklyn. We always valued health and safety, and today is no different. And I think the thing a consistent theme is we still don't know what we still don't know. So with that being said, let me go ahead and start some questions. What would interrupt in-person learning? Is there any guidance in place that allows for any kind of pivot should COVID numbers continue to rise in our communities?
Yes, ma'am. We currently, there are already protocols in place that we use with other communicable diseases or things like influenza, where we work directly and collaboratively with the health department to monitor the data. And should it be necessary, I mean, we would look at, do we need to close down a classroom or maybe a grade level or even possibly a school?
Okay, but not, we do not anticipate at the division level.
Oh, no, ma'am. Closing at the division level, no, ma'am. I think that would require a mandate
Okay.
from the Virginia Department of Education or the governor.
Thank you. I think a lot of folks listening today wanted to hear that, so thank you. We've also heard from a lot of our parents in the community about the expansion of HVA. Should they not be comfortable with where the numbers are going or with our mitigation protocols? Will all students be accommodated from the wait list who require this option?
I mean, we have a wait list and we are continuing to look for staffing, but I would not want to guarantee that every student will be able to have a seat there. It is based on staffing levels. We have been prioritizing students with health concerns that they have provided documentation.
And does that documentation need to be from a doctor
Yes,
as to
ma'am.
medical condition?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I guess I would just point out that when we talk about staffing, it is not only staffing of our virtual academy, but also it affects the complement of staffing in our schools. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We know masks are only one layer of the mitigation. I've received some questions from some constituents in the nursing field, and they'd like to know if we're going to add additional nurses and aides in response to going back in on September 8th.
Yes,
To
ma'am.
response to larger enrollment, right?
Right, and we added additional clinic assistants last year to each of our schools, and that staffing level is maintained through this year. So, the answer would be yes.
Okay, thank you. And also, nurse constituents would like to know if the committee discussed the efficacy of cloth masks for students and staff, especially where distancing can't be maintained.
We didn't specifically talk about the efficacy of cloth versus non-cloth masks. I
Okay.
can certainly ask the health department to weigh in on, the health committee to weigh in at our next meeting.
Okay, thank you. And then this chart is everything, so thank you for this. It's everything for our administrators and our families who may have specific questions. If this, then that. See this chart. Thank you for it. When will our principals, if there's additional guidance beyond this chart, when will our principals and building leaders receive additional information so that they can start setting up their buildings, cafeterias, gyms, et cetera?
I can speak, I think, for Dr. Grant in that, the Division of School Leadership, the directors are meeting consistently and continuously with their principals to make sure that they have information. Also, the liaisons that were assigned to that were at each school last year, those meetings are also restarting to make sure that there's another layer of communication within schools about any expectations.
Did the committee perhaps discuss it all, or could they discuss, based on today's meeting, what open houses look like, especially at our elementary schools, where these larger events are going to have more students and parents in buildings?
That's been a conversation. A lot of the activities I know have already been scheduled for outside so as to be able to accommodate, but they've also made some of the activities smaller by having multiple events so that they can accommodate their students and families.
Okay, and then when I read the guidance from Virginia Department of Health for vaccinated and unvaccinated quarantines, you covered cohort or learning pods, and that makes a lot of sense to me, especially at the elementary school level. But can we use that strategy at the middle school or high school level at all? It doesn't
It's not
make as much sense, does it?
exactly. works, it's easier at the elementary school, but that's where seating charts and, having those seating charts in different venues will help with contact tracing.
Okay, and Ms. Ogburn and I both discussed the prior question about the cohorting and pods, that given some of the capacity in our districts, and we're perhaps more challenged in some of our classrooms and schools, do we have any additional mitigation strategies that we're going to implement at the secondary level in some of our more crowded schools?
I mean, there are definitely some additional, looking at ways that pods could possibly happen, like in the lunchroom, around those seating charts and so on, that provides some of that podding.
Especially when they're unmasked, right? Like for PE
Exactly.
and lunch.
Exactly. And, in PE, they're looking at social distancing, and Mark Brandenberger has worked closely with the health and PE teachers as far as what that looks like with spreading out kids and not having them all in the gym at the same time. So they have worked on that. They had plans last year when our students returned.
Right.
And they'll continue to implement those strategies they developed for last year and worked well.
And this next set of questions is from staff as well as parents. For students and staff, if a quarantine becomes necessary, are staff expected to use sick time for this if they're in quarantine?
At this point, I am actually going to defer to
HR.
Francine Bolton to HR.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Yes, at this time, staff are expected to use their own sick leave.
Okay, thank you. And then how will students, I believe you covered this in the presentation, Dr. Tagan, how will students make up work if on quarantine? Would it be just like being sick from school?
Yes,
or
ma'am.
no?
It would be like being sick from school, and they would get their work, and they'd be able to have an opportunity and time to make up that work.
Okay, so
And-
that would be the same policy?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Policy
they
is
missed
the
for
same.
another illness, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your patience. I just have a few more to go. VHSL. Given what the VHSL, when I read it, it said that they were leaving it up to local school boards and their protocols for extracurricular activities. What does this mean for our athletes, our coaches, and our spectators for when we interact with maybe regional folks who don't have the same protocols in place? What does that mean for our athletes?
The decision that was made at the VHSL meeting earlier this week was that the home school, so whatever division is the home division, those rules are the ones that must be followed, even if the visiting team has different rules within their
Thank you
school.
so much. Thank you so much for that. That was the one thing I'm certain some folks in the Brooklyn district wanted the answer to. And then I have two questions on behalf of Ms. Ogburn. She would like to know, do we have the system in place at this time that can provide the vaccinations or frequent testing for employees when employees need it? Outside of our vaccination events, but the testing for employees.
Okay, so vaccinations we know are available, widely available between drugstores, physicians, and events, and the county is continuing to do events at which our employees are able to participate. For testing, that's also that has been readily available with quick turnaround.
Okay.
We have not heard any issues about not being able to get tested. Our data is coming back very quickly when we have employees that are being tested. And, if that was to change, we would, reassess the situation.
Okay, and just for the record, Ms. Ogburn wanted to ask, how many employees do we believe have been vaccinated? And I realize since we can get vaccinated at other places, that our data may be off.
Absolutely. We have no way of knowing precisely, but at one point, When we had a better understanding, it was around 6,000, and we know that there have been additional, and that includes full-time and part-time.
Okay.
But we also know they could get vaccinated outside that window of time.
Certainly.
As well as, you know, at other venues, even during the time that we were doing the events at the Raceway with the county.
And then lastly, and I appreciate your patience with me, how many contact tracing positions do we have? And how many are currently unfilled?
Contact tracing, the health department had taken over contact tracing for the summer. With the change in transmission rates, we are gearing back up. We have allocated 4 temporary positions for that Ms. Gilbert is currently working to get posted and filled.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all I had, Reverend Cooper.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kinsella. Ms. Shea?
Thank you, Ms. Kinsella, for your very thorough line of questioning, which you know I appreciate. I just have a handful, but I want to make it very clear to my colleagues and also my constituents that for me, the priority is providing our students with, to the greatest extent possible, a safe, productive, and consistent learning environment in our buildings. So, Dr. Tigan, do you believe, after hearing all of the input from the health committee and the many public health experts on the committee, that having our students wear a mask for the opening of school will provide a better opportunity for students to be able to stay in the building learning?
Yes, ma'am. Well, there was conversation about maintaining the integrity of the learning environment. And the health professionals, you know, were very strongly recommending that this was the way to do that.
Thank you. So this wasn't it was very clear amongst the health committee that wearing masks is the best way to keep our students learning in the building.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Just a couple of, follow-up pieces. I'll skip my data science reflection, but when we look at these percentages and we see that they're very similar to some that we saw in the spring, we also have to understand that while, yes, there are some breakthrough cases in vaccinated individuals, the majority of those cases are happening in unvaccinated individuals, including, a lot of our students that aren't available yet. And so that is a smaller pool that these cases are being concentrated in. And I think that's missing from some of the larger conversation around this. But I digress. Okay. It sounded like in your response to Ms. Kinsella, that our response as we have cases or as conditions change within schools, we have the ability to make that granular instead of macro across the county,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am. And that would be our approach as it has been prior to COVID with such situations.
Wonderful. Who determines how contact tracing is done and what the rules are for contact tracing?
All of our contact tracers, whether they're with the Virginia Department of Health or with the Student Health Services, have partaken in the Johns Hopkins contact tracing training, and we follow those protocols precisely. I don't know if Ms. Gilbert, if you want to add anything? No?
No, just that everyone is completed the Johns Hopkins training course that contact traced last year, that are contact tracing now, and we would keep that consistent going forward for the school year.
And Mrs. Shea, you may be asking, and I'm going to add some additional details. Certainly the training that the contact tracers themselves receive on how to do the job and do it well is important, and that's been explained. But as far as protocols, for example, of how long you need to be symptomatic, be out, those kinds of things, as Mrs. Gilbert described earlier in the presentation, that's done in partnership with the health department and based on local transmission at the time, what those thresholds may be. Correct?
Exactly, Dr. Castro. We meet, as I said, 3 times a week and sometimes daily with the health department. We review every positive case, the number of exposures, our infectious period. We go over all of that. The health department shares, as when they can, information on cases that they may have gotten reported to them, and we likewise share that information back. So it's a collaborative approach on obtaining the cases and working them.
Thank you. Thank you so much. let's see, just two more items quickly. When we look at revisiting, which was kind of the last part of your presentation, we will be revisiting this roughly every 2 weeks at board meetings,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
Okay, so we will not be only be getting an update, but also making sure our mitigation strategies fit what the community health situation is.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so it's possible as guidelines or requirements change, as well as how community health situation ebbs and flows, that our mitigation could also ebb and flow appropriately.
Yes,
And the
ma'am.
way we would update that is through a board meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure the public was clear on what the process would look like. With instruction, following up with Ms. Kinsella, it sounds like when a student is out of school and sick, just like for anything else, it's not necessarily one size fits all mandated from central office. Teachers have the flexibility as in a typical year to meet the needs of their students.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And then very last, this is for the superintendent. I just want to encourage that for the next week or so that we really are all hands on deck in processing the HVA wait list. You know, today's decision could have an impact on that wait list, and some families may change their mind one way or the other. And ensuring those families understand that it's a year-long commitment. It's not until, you know, X, Y, or Z. And so, as Ms. Kinsella stated, staffing that, it not only has an impact on HVA, but it also pulls staff out of our in-person schools, which is a bit of a domino effect. And so the sooner that we can sort through and process that, so both our families know what their plan for their student is and what to expect in the fall, but also our schools can prepare with the amount of staff they have. So any way that we can do all hands on deck in the next week to help sort that out would be terrific. Thank you, and that's all for me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shea. Ms. Atkins, we want to thank you from your colleagues for your work on our health committee. We thank you for taking on the Herculean task of representing your colleagues. So thank you on behalf of us all.
Thank you for that, but, you know, teamwork makes the dream work, and it's usually through a bunch of great people that one or two gets recognized, but in this case, every last person on that health committee deserves that recognition. And it's been some restless hours, for sure, but we're here to work, and we're glad to do that, and I think everybody on the health committee is ready to take this work and do the things we need to do and the things that we can do. So from me to the health committee, I'm appreciative and grateful. And while we know that masks alone cannot stop pandemics, we know they help mitigate them. And we also know that it takes a layered approach, not just at school, but at home and in our communities. This is not a school effort. This is not a county effort, it's a nation effort, and it really does take everyone working together. And I'm hopeful that we can look at masks in a way that doesn't divide us, but unite us so that we can heal as a nation and a county. I don't have any questions. I just want to make the statement that this is fluid. We're hearing that word a lot. We are making decisions in moments based on information that we have, trying to project out. We understand that SARS or COVID-19 has different variants. We're focused on Delta, but there are others. And so the decisions that are being made to protect. The provisions that we are trying to enforce are based on love, based on caring, based on things that you might not read in a code of conduct as well. And that is because we understand as parents that we love our children and we want the best for them. And I'm so hopeful that as we go into this school year, regardless of what side you are on or if you're in the middle, we all know that our why are protecting these kids. So with that said, I don't have any questions. Just know that the situation remains fluid. It's ever changing. And we're going to do the very best we can on the health committee, the very best we can on the school board, the very best we can in our communities to protect ourselves and our babies. Chairman Cooper, that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Ms. Atkins. Again, I echo the sentiments first to Dr. Cashwell and to you, Dr. Tigan, to Ms. Gilbert and Dr. Grant for just the time and effort and energy that you all have put in this, and we appreciate the work. I think it's appropriate that we're going to do something a little different when it comes to this Health Committee recommendation, since you have made your recommendation, and I think that we ought to take a vote to affirm the recommendation. So to say that we stand in solidarity with our superintendent and our health committee as far as supporting their recommendations. So I would like to entertain a motion to affirm the health committee's recommendation.
So moved.
It's been moved by Mrs. Atkins. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Kinsella. All in favor of affirming the health committee's recommendation, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have unanimously voted. The health committee's recommendation is affirmed. Ms. Shea.
Reverend Cooper, on behalf of Mrs. Ogburn, I wanted to also share that this is a unanimous decision amongst the 5 of us, even though she couldn't be here today.
Thank you for that point of reference. We're going to now go back on our agenda to item number 2. Ms. Shea made the motion to addend the agenda. Now we're going to move into closed session. Is there a motion to enter into closed session? Before you do it, the next item on the agenda is closed session, I'm sorry, for discussion of matters covered under A1, Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia, pertaining to the assignment, appointment, performance, disciplining, and release of contract for specific school board employees. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
So moved by Mrs. Shea. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Kinsella. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. We will now go into closed session. Next item on our agenda is the certification of closed session. Is there a motion to certify closed session?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Shea. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Atkins. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The closed session has been certified. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. For the first item, I am seeking the board's approval of the appointment of administrative personnel.
Is there a motion to approve the appointments of administrative personnel?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Kinsella. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Atkins. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The administrative appointments are approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. You all have just approved Kevin Hurley, Assistant Principal, ACE at the Academy of Virginia Randolph, Jeanette Mills, Principal, Ash Elementary School, Joanna Smith, Assistant Principal, Highland Springs High School, and Travius Brooks, Assistant Principal, Rolfe Middle School, Tiffany Young, Assistant Director in Exceptional Education, Japira Keys, Specialist with Family and Community Engagement, and Jessica Dady, HR Specialist in Licensure, Human Resources. All right, for the next item, we have our update related to proposed calendars for the 2022-2023, as well as the 2023-2024 school years. And again, just a reminder, this is not any sort of a calendar proposal related to the upcoming school year, which is slated to start on Wednesday, September 8th, but looking into the future related to calendars for the following 2 school years. Dr. Tigan.
Thank you, and I'd like to reiterate, Dr. Cashwell, that this school year starts on a Wednesday, September 8th, so that our families are aware. Good afternoon, Chairman Cooper, members of the board, and Dr. Cashwell. This afternoon, I will provide you with an update on the proposed 22-23 and 23-24 school calendars. As we consider the pre- and post-Labor Day calendar options, it is important to note that each option provides 990 instructional hours, 191 teacher workdays, and key religious and cultural holidays and observances, including Yom Kippur, Diwali, Christmas, the Lunar New Year, Easter, and Eid al-Fitr. The inclusion of the religious holidays and observances helps create a sense of belonging for both our students, their families, as well as our staff. The feedback gathered from the informational sessions that were held in July combined with the data that was received during and since the June 24th school board meeting, was reviewed to identify themes. The themes were shared with and discussed by the calendar committee at their July 21st meeting, and there were slight modifications made to the calendars based on the feedback received and input from the school board at the June 24th meeting, as well as members of the calendar committee themselves. An attempt was made to balance each of our 4 grading periods to the greatest extent possible, as that was a key feedback from the committee. In addition, half-days associated with the end of each grading period were moved to Fridays when feasible in the 2022-23 and 2023-24 pre-Labor Day calendars, as well as the post-Labor Day calendars. The revised copies of the 22-23 and 23-24 pre- and post-Labor Day calendars shown on these last 2 slides were posted on the Hcps website. As we know, they are difficult to see, so they're in board docs. I want to provide a disclaimer as we look at the feedback received. People could have responded more than once if they had additional thoughts to share, and anyone going to our website could provide feedback, even if they had no actual ties to Henrico County Public Schools or even Henrico County. I just do not want anyone to leave with the belief that the feedback process is scientific. There were approximately 670 responses, and the Department of Assessment, Research, and Evaluation viewed the entries to determine themes. I've highlighted the themes that emerged from 20 or more of the respondents. Let's begin by looking at the themes related to the pre-Labor Day option. A general statement was made by 52 of our respondents in favor of a pre-Labor Day start. That was the most common theme on the pre-Labor Day calendar. 40 comments were made relative to the academic benefits of starting the school year earlier. The greater alignment between HCPS and other schools and/or colleges was mentioned 37 times. And the message heard clearly from staff and family and shared with the school board previously was that an earlier start date should lead to an earlier end date. And that was 28 of our respondents. Now, let's examine the themes related to the post-Labor Day calendars. Again, there was a general theme of supporting the post-Labor Day start. That was the most common, and that was made by 113 responses. Nearly 100 responses suggested that post-Labor Day start would minimize the disruptions to vacations and/or family time. Others did not find the rationale convincing for moving the start date of schools, while others wanted to maintain the tradition, or maybe better worded as stability for families of a post-Labor Day start. 30 responses were related to the benefit of a full-length summer break and what that provides to stakeholders, and another 28 felt was a greater exposure to heat with a pre-Labor Day start. Based on this feedback received, those respondents who only identified as staff preferred the pre-Labor Day start, while those who identified as staff and parents or identifying just as parents preferred to maintain the post-Labor Day start. While the feedback provides insight into the wishes of a small segment of our staff and community, we know some of the school divisions in the Richmond area have already moved to a 2-week pre-Labor Day start, and more are moving to this option in 22-23. It is important we consider the impact of our school calendar on employees and families, as this can affect recruitment and retention of our teachers. It is also important to consider the educational impact of the school calendar. Maintaining a post-Labor Day start results in our students having 2 to even 4 weeks less instructional time prior to IB and AP testing. Currently, 135 out of the 135 school divisions in the state of Virginia, 105 are already starting prior to Labor Day. 29 school divisions have post-Labor Day starts, including Henrico, and 1 has a year-round calendar. A later end date may also limit mentorship and internship opportunities for our students, as students from divisions that end in May will have earlier access to high-quality work-based learning experiences. For these reasons and others, the calendar committee continues to support moving to a pre-Labor Day start, and the leadership team supports this recommendation. As we look forward to the next steps, the goal is to have the school board adopt a 22-23 and 23-24 school calendars at the August 26th school board meeting. And today, we are not, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have or any feedback you would like to share.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tigan. Ms. Atkins, want to start with you?
Thank you for the presentation. Will the results be made available on our HCPS website?
Yes, ma'am.
Do we know when those would be posted?
They're currently posted on board docs and have been since last Friday, but we'll make sure that they're posted on the website as well.
But they're not on the website right now, correct? Or
Only
are
through
they?
board docs, but
Is there going to be any other effort to garner more feedback from the community?
we continue to have an opportunity for feedback on the on the website itself. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you're referring to the email address, correct, to provide input?
There's actually a link to a form, to a Google form, where people can provide feedback.
Is electronically the only way folks can provide feedback?
No, they can also provide feedback through, providing information to their school personnel. They can provide it to, I think about through our family engagement staff as they're out in communities and trying to gather information and communicate to individuals about what the.
And I would add that we held a number of sessions to date where individuals attended and provided us their feedback in person through Teams, but it wasn't the same as the written portal. So we've archived all of that as well. And so those recordings are available for your review.
Because I was aware of, I think there's one recording, I think most of them are on YouTube. Am I correct in thinking about that, or is that a different survey?
Was the question if they're on YouTube? Well,
Yes.
actually, here comes Mr. Jenks. He can
think
tell you where they
some-
are. But
some of them
all
are
of our efforts to
transcripts.
date have been recorded, including the survey feedback.
That's,
So-
except for Mrs. Atkins is referring to the first of the 2 general public information sessions, which the recording was, let's say, unsuccessful and does not exist on our website at this time.
Okay,
The session
thank you.
for employees, as well as the second session for the general public, as well as some shorter explanatory videos do exist on the page at this moment.
And so while the recording wasn't captured of that first session, Dr. Tigan, Mr. Jenks, and I were in attendance, and we did take the feedback directly from the individuals and noted it.
and a
So
written
certainly their
transcript.
feedback was captured.
A written transcript
The
exists.
transcript as well.
And that information was taken into account as part of the data that was just shared with you.
Okay, because that was the next question. Were we able to get that
Yes.
into that data? So thank you
Yes, ma'am.
for sharing that. And those are all the questions I have.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins. Ms. Shea?
Thank you. First, I want to thank you, Dr. Tigan, and the calendar committee for revisiting those half-days that we spoke about last time and being responsive there. From a data science standpoint, I have to point out that we only had 667 respondents. And so in addition to what you pointed out, that people could have filled it out multiple times or could have not even been associated with Henrico schools and filled it out, even if all of those 667 responses are from Henrico schools families and are unique, that's still a small one-digit percentage of all of our families. And so, while it's helpful, certainly helpful to have that feedback, we have to be careful not to treat it as scientific, as you said, because it's such a small sample size that can easily be skewed. And so often it's those that have the most passionate point of view that participate in a survey. And so we all need to be mindful of that as we process these results, but very helpful to have feedback from our community. You alluded to this a little bit, Dr. Tigan, but looking at all the other districts as they are setting up their calendars for these school years, if we do not move to a pre-Labor Day start, are we poised at this time to essentially be the outlier in our region?
Yes.
And, yeah.
While, because as I said, there are additional ones moving towards the 2-week pre-Labor Day start next year, and that will put ourselves in Richmond, I think, as being the only 2 in the Richmond region to be post-Labor Day.
And I have great concern with that for a couple of reasons, one of which is really the challenge for student summer opportunities, as you alluded to a little bit. Also childcare for our families, as kind of the systems in the region go to reflect what the majority of the school districts are. If we're an outlier, that's going to leave a gap for our families that could be hard to fill. And then also just a challenge for a lot of our staff. So many of our staff who work in Henrico County, they live in other counties. And so when those schedules don't align, it creates some hardships, some undue hardships in terms of finding childcare. So anyway, those are no real questions, but those are my comments. Thank you.
And I think just to share something from even one of our own staff members who resides in Goochland and works here in Henrico and has a spouse that works in Goochland, their summer is essentially 4 weeks shorter because of their 2-week pre-Labor Day start and our post-Labor Day start. It shortens their ability to, for the summer that they have as a family. That's some of the, feedback that we've heard from staff.
Well, I thought of one other thing, and that's great. And I also spent a lot of time talking with some of our secondary athletics personnel, as well as things like marching band, and looking at, since they start practices and rehearsals in August, like how would that affect it? And because the first practice date is set by VHSL, that wouldn't bump the first practice date back. It would mean that school would overlap more with those practices, which they shared would actually, in a lot of ways, make some of these athletics and extracurriculars more accessible for a lot of our students who struggle to find transportation. It would at least have half the transportation taking care of them. And so I think it's important to also look at things with that lens. I'm done for real now.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shea. Ms. Kinsella?
Yes, thank you. I agree with Mrs. Shea's comments about the number of actual participants, at least on the online feedback, and the reliability, to your point about the data. When speaking with Ms. Ogburn very early this morning, she and I both can say that our constituents support a phased-in if it's going to be pre-Labor Day start. She said her constituents support pre-Labor Day start for the most part. And I'd just like to add that I've heard a lot of pre-Labor Day start support as well, especially if it's going to be phased in. I've also heard some questions and comments about year-round. And that's not majority or a big number, but just sharing that for the team's knowledge. I really like the idea of having more time for community members to weigh in. This is the summer. It is a very big decision. And I would just, so many of our families were checked out on vacation at the latter part of June and through July. So if we could just gather a little bit more feedback from our communities, I'd appreciate that.
And I think that's exactly why we delayed any vote on this until the next meeting, so we'd have more time and hopefully more engagement within our community.
Yes, thank you. That's all I have.
And I would note, just to your point, Mrs. Kinsella, and to members of the board, if if you would want us to go beyond, while we've proposed taking a vote on the proposed calendars at our next board meeting, if you would like to see additional survey results or additional surveying done and postpone that timeline, we certainly can do that. We wanted to be, I know, responsive to the fact that as board members, you noted that you wanted to make sure constituents were afforded at least a year's notice. And so that puts us in that window still, but we'll just look to you for any guidance related to shifting that timeline, should that be the board's preference.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cashwell. Thank you so much, Dr. Tigan.
Oh, Chairman Cooper, I
Yes,
just
ma'am.
have one point of clarification, if I could take the floor for a moment. Dr. Tigan, you shared that families could call the school. Do you want them to call the principal to share their feedback?
They certainly may, they can share it with their administrator. That will make sure that our administrators have,
Because
expect that if they're told that, if it's broadcasted more widely.
Because now that families are getting back into the groove of things, and I'm reading, and to Mrs. Kinsella's point, a lot of folks were disengaged, but now they're back engaged. And I want to be sure that I'm clear after you said, tell them contact the school. That is going to happen, but I certainly want to make sure that I give them whom to contact in the school. And keeping in mind, we have back to school things happening where principals are saying, reach out to me. I just want to make sure we're clear here.
And I think we can put the link to where the place on the website. I know our principals are great at sharing those kinds of links. They send weekly newsletters, and now that families are tuned into the back-to-school events and those kinds of things, they're definitely keyed into those newsletters. We can encourage all schools to share that information about where families should go. And certainly, if a family doesn't have access to that, or they would share feedback with any staff member, we could get them to the right place.
We can ask them, to make sure that they share in their weekly update who that contact may be. As far as, we have family engagement staff in our schools that would be appropriate, and they can really help put that information into the Google form so it's part of the collection.
I think I'm really trying to cater towards the families that would prefer to have the conversation or the human contact. So I like the idea of the principal sending something out, but I also don't want to overwhelm principals by telling our families to call the school. So that's where I want to be delicate. So I'll wait, we can pause, we don't have to solve it here. But I think giving families a specific contact outside of the e-communications, because we know that families that are on social media and are on our website quite a bit, they will know about that. But our families that are really trying to prepare for back to school and some of these other things, they're going to the meet and greets and they're going to the schools, and perhaps there's opportunities there to solicit feedback.
Absolutely. We'll work with school leadership and make sure we have opportunities for families at different venues throughout with the schools.
Fantastic, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tigan. Quick question. Dr. Tigan, what would you say would be the academic benefit to, starting earlier as far as pre instead of post?
There's, I think it depends on the students, what that, for different families, it may be different. Definitely our students would have a greater advantage if we were starting earlier with those standardized tests that are given at the same point in the year, regardless of where you live and when your school system starts. So I think of the IB, I think of the AP assessments. I also think those opportunities in the late spring and summer for our kids to be able to actually have those internship and mentorship experiences. That's how they really find out what they want to do as they continue to move forward in their education, whether it's still in high school or whether that's something that they're looking at post-secondary opportunities. And so the more time, anything that puts them at a disadvantage for those opportunities, I think hurts our students academically. And so they're, even those students, as Michelle was saying, who are involved in marching band, football, any of the fall sports, that being able to be engaged in the academics earlier in the season, I think is a benefit to our athletes for having that support within the schools for the academic structures that are aligned with our athletic programs. And those are all things that we don't control, that, truly are out of our control other than, how we set our school calendar.
Thank you for that insight. Dr. Cashwell?
All right, seeing no more questions, we'll look forward to keeping the board abreast of any feedback we do receive outside of that, the form on the website, and any additional feedback that comes to us. We'll work with our school leadership folks to make sure that we have a variety of mechanisms to support our principals who may be getting feedback from their constituencies directly. All right, the next item or items that I have are related to policy, proposed for policy revision. So the first one, 5.03, is an update on proposed policy revisions we brought before this board already. Of course, they're out for soliciting public comment related to these, any public input rather. And so we simply bring them forward again for the board to see if you have any additional questions. We're not seeking your approval on these policies at this time, just another opportunity to review those. And Dr. Teigen can provide a quick summary, and we're happy to take any questions you may have.
Yes, good afternoon again, Chairman Cooper, members of the board, and Dr. Cashwell. I want to provide you with an update on the feedback received on the following policies: P6-18-001, the student education records; P6-18-006, the disclosure of student data; P6-18-008, the transfer of record data to a third party; P6-18-011, conditions and procedures for amending content of a student's education record; P7-14-001, authorization responsibility; and P11-10-001, community partnerships. And as you will recall, revisions to these policies were presented at the June 24th school board meeting and posted for public comment prior to seeking approval at the August 26th school board meeting. To date, no public comment has been received, but feedback previously shared by the board members will be considered by Monday's policy committee, and any revisions will be reflected in the policies that would come back for your review and vote on the 26th.
Thank you so much, Dr. Teigen. Board members, before you are numerous policies. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but I'm going to start with Ms. Kinsella and come this way. Any questions or comments, Ms. Kinsella?
Not at this time, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Shea?
I have, we just wanted to share on behalf of Ms. Ogburn, when we're looking at P6-18-006, the disclosure of data, it references the legal standard of confidentiality. And in order for clarity, Ms. Ogburn would like us to consider adding a definition within, kind of like a comma, which means this, comma. So as we take that back to the policy committee, just for clarity, for anybody who's reading it to understand what the policy means.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Atkins?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Dr. Castro?
All right, seeing no questions on those, I will move forward to seeking your approval on a number of other policies that have already come before you for your review. So seeking your approval on proposed revisions to policy P2-04-006, electronic participation in meetings from remote locations.
Is there a motion to approve proposed revisions to policy P2-04-006, electronic participation in meetings from remote locations?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Atkins. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Ms. Shea. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The policy has been approved.
Thank you. Also seeking your approval of proposed revisions to policy P4-03-004, professional development.
Is there a motion to approve proposed revisions to policy P4-03-004, professional development?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Shea. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Atkins. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The policy has been approved.
Thank you. Next, seeking your approval of proposed revisions to policy P4-05-016, employee conduct.
Is there a motion to approve proposed revisions to policy P4-05-016, employee conduct?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Shea. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Atkins. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. The policy's been approved.
Thank you. Also seeking the board's approval of proposed revisions to policy P6-11-001, school meal program.
Is there a motion to approve proposed revisions to policy P6-11-001, school meal program?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Kinsella. Is there a second? Second by Ms. Shea. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. The policy has been approved.
Thank you. Now seeking the board's approval of 5 policies, all of which have been changed to align with the legislative change to the term status of a veteran to military status as a characteristic that's protected from discrimination. And that's within the policies you see in the information you have above you. So looking for that approval related to P1-03, P4-01-001, P6-04-004, P6-04-007, and P9-09-001.
Is there a motion to approve proposed revisions to the reference policies?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Atkins. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Kinsella. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. The policies have been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Next, I am seeking the board's approval to the contract amendment with Powerschool Group, LLC, for our Performance Matters assessment and analytics software.
Is there a motion to approve the contract amendment with Powerschool Group, LLC, for the Performance Matters Assessment and Analytics software?
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Kinsella. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Atkins. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the ayes have it. The contract has been approved.
Thank you. Next, recommending that the school board accept the Chesapeake Bay Restoration Fund Grant Award of $4,500.
Is there a motion to accept the grant award?
So moved.
Been moved by Mrs. Shea, seconded by Mrs. Atkins. All in favor? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. The grant has been accepted.
Thank you. Also seeking the board's approval to accept the International Baccalaureate, also known as IB, Organization Grant Award of $15,000.
Is there a motion to accept the IB grant award?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Shea. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Kinsella. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. The grant has been accepted.
Thank you. Also seeking the board's acceptance of the Integrated English Literacy and Civics Education, or IELCE, Program Grant Award funding of $150,000 from the Virginia Department of Education.
Is there a motion to accept the IELCE Program Grant Award?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Kinsella. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Atkins. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. The grant has been accepted.
Thank you. Also recommending that the school board accept 2 science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM, competition team grant awards totaling $10,000 from the Virginia Department of Education. And I should note those would benefit Harvey and Laburnum Elementary Schools.
All right. I can't make it, so is there a motion to accept the STEM Competition Team Grant Awards?
So moved.
If so moved by Mrs. Atkins, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Shea. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. The grant awards have been accepted.
Thank you. Also seeking your approval to accept the Stopping the Pushout of Black Girls, a multi-pronged approach project grant, and this is related to some work being done at Elko Middle School in partnership with the Virginia Department of Education, and this grant is from the Virginia Department of Education.
Is there a motion to accept the grant from the VDOE?
So moved.
Been moved by Mrs. Atkins. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Kinsella. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. The grant has been accepted.
Thank you. Next, I am recommending that the school board accept McKinney-Vento American Rescue Plan, Esser grant funding in the amount of $125,000. And I do see Mrs. Alsop coming forward. Oh, nope, okay. If you have any questions, I thought maybe she was ready to answer them, but certainly seeking your approval of that. I think she's probably making her way for the next item. It's seeking your approval for those McKinney-Vento grant funding award.
Is there a motion to accept the ESSER grant funding of $125,000?
Yes, so moved.
Been moved by Mrs. Shea. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Kinsella. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the ayes have it. The grant has been accepted.
Thank you. And as I noted, Mrs. Alsop was making her way to the podium related to this next item, which we will be seeking your acceptance of the state set-aside grant funding under the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations, or CRRSA Act, and the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief 2 funds, or Esr 2 as it's also known, in the amount of $987,000. And Mrs. Alsop will provide an overview of that set-aside grant we anticipate receiving, per your approval. Mrs. Alsop.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Cooper, Vice Chair Shea, Dr. Cashwell, and school board members. It is my pleasure to present to you information regarding the state set-aside funds under Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief 2. The state set-aside Esser 2 award is $987,000. The grant period is from March 2020 to September 2023. The spending plan will be from June 2021 through September 2023 for the identified expenses. The state set-aside Esser funds were awarded to school divisions through an application process with the purpose of addressing unfinished learning and/or extending the school year or providing year-round school. The ultimate purpose of the funds are to address the impact of COVID-19 on elementary and secondary schools. The grant application was prepared with an intentional focus on the Hcps strategic plan and the new instructional model. The grant application focused in the areas of academics, social emotional needs, and partnership engagement. As we know, Hcps will return to a full face-to-face instruction model this fall with a commitment to re-engage and provide learning recovery opportunities. Just over $395,000 has been allocated to provide additional hours for social workers, attendance officers, school counselors, and school psychologists to make connections with identified students who were not fully engaged during the global pandemic. During the 2020-2021 school year, the nation saw a decline in the number of students identified under McKinney-Vento, and Hcps also saw this decline due to some families electing the virtual option. With the eviction moratorium ending, Hcps will be proactive in making intentional connections with families by adding an additional McKinney-Vento Family Assessment Analyst position. Student learning will be a focus of our state set-aside Esser funds through providing various opportunities to provide for our students. Funds have been set aside to increase tutoring opportunities by increasing our interventionist budget and setting aside funds for virtual tutoring, anytime, anywhere, for our students. Funds will also provide one-to-one or small group tutoring for English language newcomers. Through the Equity, Diversity, and Opportunity section, site-based summer learning opportunities are being provided through the SMART Summer Program in conjunction with the Henrico Mental Health Department at Henrico Arms, Richfield Place, Oakland Village, and Coventry Apartments. The focus is on underserved elementary students in communities with low numbers of in-person return during the 2020-2021 school year. Family engagement is key to the success of our students. Funds have been set aside to provide family engagement sessions focused on literacy. As a support for our student learning focus, instructional resources will be provided through the Smart Summer Program and the English as a Second Language Office. We will also be using funds to provide home library books for identified student groups. At this time, I'm available for questions or comments.
And if I might, Mr. Chairman and Mrs. Alsop, before we take any questions, just as a point of clarification, particularly for those who may be following along and watching related to Esser, since we've talked a lot about grant applications and grants that are out there, I want to provide some context. You probably have heard us discuss as an administration our plans for spending on Esr 1. We also had Esr 2. This is in addition to what we had already proposed in spending for Esr 2. So Mrs. Alsop and her team, I want to applaud them for their tremendous efforts in applying for these set-aside funds, which are in addition to what we've already applied for Esr 2. And so you know that to date, we've been leveraging our Esr 1 and Esr 2 funds, not only for things to take care of the physical health and safety mitigation supplies and those sorts of things, additional staffing, but as well remediation and tutoring and expanded summer academy. And what you see here is an intentional effort by Mrs. Alsop and her team to apply for some additional set-aside funds that are really drilled down, particularly working with our family engagement team, McKinney-Vento, our ELL folks, to really fine-tune the ability to provide resources even more. So they've done a tremendous job in putting this set-aside grant together, and I just want to applaud Mrs. Alsop for that and provide some additional context.
Yep, thank you so much, Ms. Alsop, for you and your staff getting the set aside. So thank you so much. Ms. Kinsella, anything?
I just want to ask a question that, did you, is this spending plan sufficient based on what the Family and Community Engagement team has learned being out in the communities this summer? Do we feel like this is responsive and where we need to be? I mean, I'm thrilled about it because I see, you know, EL support, remediation support, tutoring support, so many of the great things that we need on top of the other Esr 2 funding. But do we feel after being out in our communities for the past few weeks, if this is sufficient?
I think it's a great start, especially with the work that our re-engagement team has been doing out in the community, connecting with families, and then finding where those needs are. And we found literacy to be an area of need, so making sure that we were supporting families in that area. And then, of course, truly bringing in and supporting our EL students with their supports of being newcomers to our school division.
Okay. Thank you so much for all the work you and your team are doing. I appreciate it.
Ms. Shea.
Thank you. So you mentioned in response to Ms. Kinsella's question, that was a great start. As we identify more of those needs, is there some room in our Esr 3 funds coming through to be able to meet those needs that we're identifying?
I'm going to tackle that one just because I know this expands a bit out of Mrs. Alsop's arena as well. So we have not formally made our Esr 3 application. As you may be aware, we've got a public hearing this evening. The board has yet to approve it. I'll be seeking your approval at our following meeting. We're still gathering feedback on that. But what you will see in our proposal are a number of items that I think speak to some of the needs Mrs. Alsop was leaning into, and that's particularly around family engagement. So our proposal does include additional family engagement vehicles to replace Big Blue, as well as some other supporting resources and materials. So you'll see that for anything we may not have met in Esr 1, 2, or 2 set aside here, we have made a point of listing those within our proposed, and it's only proposed at this point, Esr 3 application, again, which we're still finalizing.
Thank you. And then also I just want to make our public aware as some of the feedback I've gotten around both Esr2 and Esr3 is, all the things, it's a large sum of money. So all the things that people want us to fund with it, but it comes with a very specific set of guidelines on what it can be spent on. As well as in Henrico in general, we try not to use one-time funds such as these ESSER grants to fund continuing cost. But I do appreciate that we figured out how to make it work to prioritize those positions that were originally in our pre-COVID budget and we weren't able to fulfill, but we are using some of our ESSER funds to fund those, but also giving ourselves quite a bit of runway to try to figure out how to encompass them in our general budget by 2024. So anyway, no real questions except I appreciate our approach and not trying to create a financial ledge, but I also appreciate the team's hard work in figuring out how to fill that kind of financial divot from COVID and meet our student needs back in the building this year, particularly around mental health.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shea. Ms. Atkins?
I'm so appreciative of going the extra mile and looking for more money. So thank you and your team for that. I do have a question around attendance officers. I know I bring that up often, but will the funding allow for attendance officers at each school?
So right now, the funding has been set aside kind of for this summer. We're going to do some throughout the school year and then for next summer also. And so it's been done within magisterial districts that they have a team approach that is working with each of the schools to support identifying and working with families and making connections.
My thought process is even if it's not permanent, particularly this school year, attendance officers are necessary in every last one of our schools, even if it's temporary for the 21-22 school year, in order to effectively understand, not just take roll, but understand the reasons behind why our children may not be at school. And so I was pleased to see that there, but I just want to stress, Dr. Cashwell, the importance of attendance officers at each school, the schools that are doing well and the schools that need improvement. And the reason being is even though schools are doing well, perhaps there are other schools that can learn from what they are doing well and work collaboratively across all the districts and not just focused in one or two. So I'm pleased to see attendance officers. I'd like for us to continue our work there to understand why our numbers the way they are across all the districts. Great, and those that need improvement. Wanted to share that. I also wanted to ask, would this be an appropriate moment for me to share considerations for the Sr3 funding, or do you prefer to wait till we get to finance?
Certainly happy to take those now, since I think the discussion has opened up broadly to not just the ESSER set aside here, but sort of how we've used all of these sources, if you will, to fulfill our larger gaps and wraparounds as a result of COVID. So I know Mr. Wack's available, and I'm happy to answer questions you might have. Again, recognizing that we understand that we're going to hear from our public this evening related to Esr3, and that may continue to shape our plans. And it's certainly something that's still a work in progress as we've solicited feedback to date, but would be happy to hear from you now on that as well.
All right, so I will do that, Ms. Alsop. I don't know if you want to stand. I do have quite a bit of thoughts here. So if you wanted to sit, you can, and the same goes for you, Mr. Wack, because I'm going to go through it first.
And I'll
then ask.
Just note that if Mrs. Alsop does leave the podium, and you're certainly welcome to do, we're not going to forget to seek the board's approval of this SR2 set aside. So I know that's an action you need us to take,
Yes.
and I will seek their action on that prior to us leaving this discussion.
Well, perhaps we should do that first. Let's do
Okay.
that first if we're in agreement, and then I'll roll into the other pieces.
All right, so quick question. Ms. Alsop, on $125,000, is the assessment analyst being hired out of that fund for McKinney-Vento?
Let me look. So the assessment analyst position is out of that $395,000 amount that was listed there.
Okay. What about, are we, so with the additional, like you said, the moratorium I mean, do we feel like we're relatively financed to be able to assist that population of our students and families?
I do believe this additional position will help. We've started to see an increase as forms are starting to come in, and as we know, families are in need of support. Team is also working to connect our families with community-based resources, because there is funding out there to help support families with their back pay of their rent. And so trying to connect, a lot of places have the money, but they're working hard to make those connections with the families that are in need. And our McKinney-Vento team is supporting and working with the community to help do that.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Well, since there's no more questions, Madam, is there a motion to accept the CRRSA and Esr 2 grant funding of $987,000?
So moved.
Been moved by Mrs. Kinsella. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Shea. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. The grant has been accepted.
Thank you.
So I think we're taking questions related to how this Esr 2 we just approved, and thank you, by the way, set aside fits in with our larger Esr proposed spending plans. And so, Mrs. Atkins?
So I want to first start making sure I address Sandston, Varina, and Holland Springs. Some of the questions I received is, we know the amount, but when you're hearing the verbiage allowable usage, what does that mean? And so I'm going to share some of the considerations that's at top of mind for Esr 3. I'm looking forward to hearing more ideas and recommendations in our public hearing at 5 o'clock, but I also just wanted to go ahead and share some of those in this moment. I'll start with the allowable usage, and there are more. I'm just going to point out the few that I think many of you would be mostly interested in. And so it's stated in the Commonwealth of Virginia Department of Education Superintendent's memo, that's number 110-21. It specifically states for the funds to be used for activities to address the unique needs of low-income children or students, children with disabilities, English learners, racial and ethnic minorities, students experiencing homelessness, and foster care youth, including how outreach and service delivery will meet the needs of each population. An additional section talks about providing information and assistance to parents and families on how they can effectively support students, including in a distance learning environment and school facility repairs, and improvements to enable operation of schools to reduce the risk of virus transmission and exposure to environmental health hazards to support student health needs. And I wanted to share those two particular areas, one, because my considerations are aligned with those particular pieces. Please know that there are more that's listed in that superintendent's memo, but just highlighting those. The areas of consideration I'd like for the superintendent and division leadership team to research and consider is looking at technology or resources around more evidence-based instruction for students with dyslexia. I think an investment in materials could assist in that particular space. Also, an increased staff for special education, self-contained classrooms, particularly whether it's instructional assistants, substitutes, or monitors. We need more hands in the classroom now more than ever, I believe, for this upcoming school year. Also, when it comes to IEPs, I know we have a multidisciplinary approach that works with our families. My recommendation is to expand upon that collaborative space and look at some real quality progress monitoring tools for our families to better educate them on that process and navigate that journey. That's a category of special education in the top of mind in using the funds. The other space is around equity. I'd like for superintendent and team to really take a look in an investment in staff for our Office of Equity, Diversity, and Opportunity. I think the maintenance of equity, provision, protection, and participation will help address inequities that we had before COVID and those that are going to continue because of COVID. It would definitely serve our children and communities as COVID really has put this flashlight on academic needs, social emotional needs. So I would like for that to be considered as far as additional staff, even if temporary. The last space that I would really like to see a larger investment in is innovation and environment. I would like to see a significant investment in outdoor spaces. The first is designing outdoor classrooms to promote mental wellness, creating outdoor spaces and resources that address student social and emotional intelligence and coping skills. I think that when we think about outdoors, making a solid investment in outdoor furniture that is weatherproof, furniture that can be assembled and deconstructed in moments for use outside. I think that it's important to do that now because of COVID. It gives us space to social distance, amongst other things, but also in the future. Having the opportunity to shift from in a classroom to outside of a classroom with furniture that's already prepared for teachers and students. And just to give you an idea of modular furniture that can support individual or group work, whether it's the kinesthetic movement for thinking about students who have a tough time sitting still in a chair. Being outdoors could allow for more movement, flexibility, and thinking space. The other area around innovation in outdoors, particularly is at Fairfield Middle School and the Cornerstone Community Farm. For those that are not familiar with that, it really is an outdoor farm living laboratory. It's a very special place where education and entrepreneurial opportunity intersect. It's a wonderful opportunity where children get outdoors. Instruction is also provided at the farm. And it also it just goes beyond the student. It gets to the families, the adults. It brings them together in a space to learn as well. Whether they're learning about how food grows, whether they're learning about the history of the soil, and also whether they're looking at STEM, science and technology, all of these pieces, this wealth of wonderful that sits over there at the Cornerstone Farm. I'd like a significant investment over at Fairfield Middle School, and if we can't get significant, then perhaps we can just get a staff position filled. And I will give you the title, a technical specialist position for Fairfield Middle School, specifically for the Cornerstone Farm. So those are the recommendations that I have at top of mind for some of the Sr3 funding. I'm looking forward for 5 o'clock to hearing about more ideas, but wanted to make sure that those things were on the radar.
Thank you. We've taken note of those.
Thank you, Ms. Atkins. Thank you, Dr. Castro. I believe we're at 7.01, review of proposed revisions to student code of conduct.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Dr. Noel is coming forth. We do have some proposed revisions that we want to review with you at today's meeting, and then we would be subsequently seeking your approval related to revisions for the code of conduct at our next board meeting. So Dr. Noel, I'll turn it over to you to provide a review of the revisions.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Cashwell, this afternoon, I will be sharing with you an update of the 2021-2022 Code of Student Conduct, as well as Student Behavior and Administrative Response, better known as SBAR. SBAR is replacing the long-standing DCV, or Discipline, Crime, and Violence codes. As you recall, last year, we introduced SBAR by placing the SBAR codes next to DCV codes so our teachers and administrators could familiarize themselves with the codes and their meanings as we prepared for a full rollout this year. For the next few minutes, I will discuss the following: the rationale, focus on the why, levels of interventions and responses, SBAR behavior categories, behavior support and discipline in virtual learning, I've also attached a red line version and a clean version of the proposed 2021-2022 Code of Student Conduct for you to review, and then I will answer any questions. We're asking for approval of the 2021-22 Code of Student Conduct at the August 26th School Board Work Session. First, the rationale. Why do we need to make these changes? Well, due to the disparity in student discipline, school divisions across the country are shifting from a reactive, punitive approach to a more proactive, preventative approach regarding inappropriate student behavior. I am pleased to inform some and remind others that this shift in philosophy is not something new for Henrico, as we've been firmly committed to making exclusionary practices a last resort by delivering proactive and preventative approaches for a number of years, and have been an example for other school divisions across Virginia, as well as for the Virginia Department of Education. A great deal of what is in the Virginia Model Guidance Policy reflects our Code of Student Conduct. However, research shows that nationally, the discipline disparity for students with disabilities and African American students compared to non-disabled white students is still a cause for concern. Because of that, we continue to seek and employ supports and interventions that will help students meet our behavioral expectations, thereby reducing any discipline disparity. With that said, we feel it is necessary to update the Code of Student Conduct in order to continue promoting positive and preventative approaches to student conduct, train Hcps staff on SBAR reporting categories, and keep positive instructional approaches to behavior at the forefront in order to ensure schools remain safe, supportive, and equitable learning environments. Now, the new student behavior and administrative responses. First, we will cover the 5 levels of interventions and responses. Please keep in mind throughout that just like our former code violation categories, these levels act as a rubric for building level administrators when determining appropriate consequences. For example, level 1 responses are intended to prevent further behavioral issues while keeping the student in school. At this level, as with levels 2 and 3, the focus is on restorative practices and behavioral instruction. The most severe consequence at level 1 is 2 days of in-school suspension or reset. This level is equal to our code violation category 1. Next, level 2 interventions and responses. Depending on the severity of the behavior, short-term removal from class may be appropriate. For infractions that warrant a level 2 response, the maximum consequence is 3 days of in-school suspension or reset, and again, with behavioral interventions and/or restorative practices. This level is also equal to code violation category 1. It is at level 3 that we see the first possible out-of-school suspension. Depending on the severity of the behavior and/or safety concerns, behavior on this level may result in a student's short-term suspension between 1 and 5 days. This level is equal to our code violation category 3. And please note that levels 1, 2, and 3 are exclusively handled at the building level. Level 4 interventions and responses may require a suspension hearing with the Disciplinary Review Hearing Office. To provide additional support, the student may receive a referral to community-based services to address any unwanted behaviors. At this level, short-term suspension is still an option. However, our principals also have the option of recommending a long-term suspension and placement at one of our alternative learning environments. Level 4 is akin to our code violation category 4 or 5A. The last level is level 5. Level 5 interventions and responses shall require a recommendation for expulsion hearing with the Disciplinary Review Hearing Office. This level is reserved for the most serious code violations. Level 5 infractions are the same as our code violation category 5B. Now we will cover the 5 behavior categories under SBAR. And I say 5 in air quotes because the state added another category that we'll shortly discuss. To facilitate an equitable and responsive application of our Code of Student Conduct, the following brings together the categories of student behaviors and the levels of administrative responses. The behavior categories you will see are listed from least severe to most severe and are designed to identify the impact student behavior has on the school environment and on learning. They encourage awareness of the student's social emotional development and emphasize the importance of helping students meet our academic and behavioral needs. The first category, BAP, or behavior that impedes academic progress, are behaviors that typically indicate the student's lack of self-control or self-awareness. The student may need help in understanding how their unwanted behaviors impact others, so training and social awareness may also be indicated. Before we get too far into the Code of Student Conduct changes, allow me to remind you what our code currently looks like. In years past, our code looked like this. We had 15 categories for both elementary and secondary school, with a great deal of verbiage under each. And you can see that the crosswalk of the underlying SBAR codes with the DCB codes. To streamline, and if passed by the board, our code would take on this appearance. Please note that the philosophy and fidelity of the proposed Code of Student Conduct is exactly the same, only the appearance and the wording are different. The chart will be the same for both elementary and secondary school students. The only difference between the two will be at what level the infractions fall. For example, in this category, the consequences fall at these levels. All examples given are for secondary school. And please note that the SBAR levels are directly aligned with our current Code of Student Conduct and the practices. We're simply transitioning from our current practices to the new SBAR reporting categories. Next, BSO, behaviors related to school operation. These behaviors interfere with the daily operation of school. Students exhibiting these behaviors may need help developing self-management, self-awareness, or social awareness skills. Here are the 14 BSO infractions and where they fall under each level. The third behavior category is RB, or relationship behaviors. Relationship behaviors create a negative relationship between two or more people that does not result in physical harm. Students who exhibit difficulty with relationship behaviors may also have difficulty with other social emotional competencies. As you see in red, language has been added that specifically addresses hate speech, slurs based on race, ethnicity, color, gender, gender identity, gender expression, transgender status, and sexual orientation. There are 11 RB infractions, and here are where they fall under each level. As you see, administrators are to report hate speech to their school resource officer. Now we move to BSC, or behaviors that present a safety concern. These behaviors create unsafe conditions for students and staff. They may lie in any of the social emotional competencies. Therefore, administrators should investigate the underlying why or the story behind the student's behavior. BSC is the largest category with 27 entries, and here are 10 of them and where they fall at each level. The most serious of the 5 behavior categories is BESO, or behaviors that endanger self or others. These behaviors endanger the health, safety, and welfare of either the student or other stakeholders. While they're indicative of poor decision-making, students who exhibit these behaviors may also have developmental needs in other social emotional areas. There are 17 under BESO, and here are where they fall. Earlier I said that there were 5 categories in air quotes because the state added a 6th category for persistently dangerous behaviors. These behaviors are described in the Virginia Unsafe School Choice Policy. These behaviors include, but are not limited to, firearms, the distribution of illegal drugs, and assault and battery. Here you see that there are 16 under the persistently dangerous category. Because of the serious nature of the offenses, I propose that all of these be a level 5 offense, which means it is an automatic recommendation for expulsion, and each must be reported to law enforcement. For the 2021 school year, we will have the introduction of Henrico's first virtual academy. Because of that, we propose adding to the Code of Student Conduct a section called Behavior Support and Discipline in Virtual Learning. The purpose of this document is to provide staff with guidance for supporting students' behavioral needs in order to promote student engagement in the virtual learning environment. The Code of Student Conduct applies to all students, including those who are participating in the virtual learning environment. Virtual learning presents both unique opportunities and considerations for student behavior. Regardless of the setting, the goal is to create a safe and supportive environment where adults respond to student behavior with interventions and consequences aimed at understanding and addressing the causes for the behavior, resolving conflicts, meeting students' needs, and keeping students in school and learning. In the 2021 Code of Student Conduct, we removed language, particularly under dress code, that was subjective, ethnic, and/or gender specific. This year, in an effort to ensure that more students are supported by our Code of Student Conduct, we propose adding the following phrase: sexual orientation, gender identity, or transgender status to the 2021 Code of Student Conduct. This phrase will be added to dress code. You can see that the term gender expression has also been added here, but only to this section. The phrase has also been added to assault, fighting, and threats, and to bullying, harassment. And lastly, for your convenience, I've attached a red line version and a clean version of the proposed Code of Student Conduct for you to review. And again, we're asking for your approval for the 2021-2022 Code of Student Conduct at the August 26th School Board work session. Thank you, and now we'll answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Noel.
You're welcome.
Ms. Atkins, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Chairman Cooper, and also thank you for your presentation. I do have a question around the restorative practices. Do the restorative methods change depending upon the level of intervention?
If it was, I guess if we're talking about tiers, if it's a tier 1 intervention,
Yes.
you know, that would be, you know, the majority of the school population. That would definitely dictate at what level and how deep and into details it would go for the infractions, whether it's just going to be restorative circle or the meeting with the students, or if it's a student with staff. But depending on which tier it would be, would absolutely dictate at what level.
Would it be possible to get a high-level overview of the restorative practices used and the specific methods that are chosen depending upon those tiers?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ms. Shea?
Thank you. Thank you for that very comprehensive overlook. You may have addressed this, and I may have missed it during the very comprehensive overlook, but I know we've talked a lot about the decodes and how that's where a lot of our gap in discipline occurs. And so when I am looking through these various behavioral categories, I don't see the words like disrespect and defiance and that sort of thing. I see more specific examples.
Yeah, these are looking at the actual behaviors of the student. Those decodes, disrespect, defiance, could be somewhat subjective. Case in point, where I had a meeting this morning with VDOE, and let's say if a student and a teacher are having a disagreement and the student walks away, some would say that that student's being defiant, but some would also say that that student is taking an opportunity to cool down. We want to be able to de-escalate situations versus escalate them. So if the student has to walk away to calm down, I think that would be a wise choice versus also saying that that student is being defiant. So those subjective codes and those subjective language has been removed.
Wonderful. Yeah, I guess that was my question. Like, did the decode still exist somewhere, or have we? It seems like we've been more explicit, more descriptive.
Focus on the behavior.
And focus on the behavior. Great.
Ma'am.
That was my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shea. Ms. Kinsella?
I don't really have any questions. I just wanted to just to comment and thank you for the work as we transform what this looks like.
Yes.
And truly focusing on the underlying behavior.
Thank you.
It looks great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I echo my colleagues. I think it's always been important for me that we are conscious and cognizant of the reality that exists, the disparities,
Yes.
children, especially males, African-American males and students with disabilities. So to act as though those numbers are not skewed so far in different directions would be to be kind of with blinders on. So we're very intentional about, like you said, the behavior and trying to wrap around our children to assist them, you know, in all of the areas that they need. And so I look forward to voting on that next meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Madam Superintendent.
Thank you again, Dr. Noel, for your presentation and your work, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next meeting as I seek the board's approval of the proposed revisions you shared today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item, I am seeking the board's approval of a resolution that is requesting the Board of Supervisors authorize the issuance and sale of up to $55 million in general obligation school bonds to the Virginia Public School Authority. And this is related to a funding strategy for our two ACE Center capital projects. So seeking the board's approval for that.
Ms. Kinsella took her glasses off, and she's beaming at me, so I'm going to let her make this motion. Ms. Kinsella, would you like to make a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Shea. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The resolution has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Next, I am requesting the school board's approval of a proposal from Finley Asphalt and Sealing Incorporated in the amount of $187,595 for pavement improvements to the main parking area at Hungary Creek Middle School.
Is there a motion to approve the proposed $187,595 for pavement improvements at Hungary Creek Middle School?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Kinsella. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Atkins. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The proposal has been approved.
Thank you. Next, I am seeking the school board's approval of a right-of-way agreement between the County School Board of Henrico, Virginia, and the Virginia Electric and Power Company, or Dominion Energy Virginia, for the Highland Springs High School Replacement Project.
Is there a motion to approve the right-of-way agreement for Highland Springs High School Replacement Project?
So moved.
Been moved by Ms. Atkins. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Mrs. Shea. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. The agreement has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. That concludes any items I have this afternoon.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Superintendent. The next item on our agenda is public forum. Citizens had until 8 a.m. this morning to submit comments to the board for our review using a link on the Hcps website. Citizens took advantage of that opportunity, and we sincerely appreciate their input. Comments were compiled and provided to us prior to the start of today's meeting, and those comments have also been posted in board docs, so thank you again. The next item on our agenda is unfinished business. Not hearing any. The next item on our agenda is new business. Not hearing any. The next item on our agenda is a 5 p.m. public hearing for the American Rescue Plan Act Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief 3 funds. We will be requested to approve the Esr spending plan with any amendments at the August 26, 2021 work session. I will provide the information at that time. So until then, next is our announcement of meeting dates. The school board's next meeting will be at a work session scheduled on Thursday, August 26, 2021 at 1 p.m. in the New Bridge Learning Center Auditorium. The meeting time, as always, may be adjusted if needed. This meeting is now adjourned. I want to call to order our public hearing tonight to receive input on the school division's draft spending plan for its allocation of $78,318,248.87 in American Rescue Plan Act Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief 3 funds. John Wack, Chief Financial Officer, will share some information before we proceed.
All right, Mr. Wack is going to make his way to the podium. Thank you, Chairman, members of the board, and to all who are present either to speak or to listen to our public hearing, again, related to our preliminary proposal and draft for how the division plans to apply to expend our Esser 3 funds. I'll turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Wack, who will provide a brief summary before we begin the hearing.
Good evening, school board members and Dr. Cashwell. Tonight we just have a brief presentation on our $78.3 million elementary and secondary school emergency relief, or Esr 3 public grant award, federal grant award. I will note that we aren't seeking any action from the school board this evening on the draft spending plan. We're seeking input through this public hearing and also seeking written comment through a Google form that has been posted on our website. I would note that we had received approximately 70 written comments as of yesterday. So looking at all of our Esr Awards, we did receive about $9.45 million in our Esr 1 award, which can be used through September of 2022. We received about $34.87 million in our Esr 2 award, which was approved by the school board in April, and the funds were appropriated by the Board of Supervisors in June. Earlier on today's agenda, you approved our $987,000 Esr 2 set-aside grant award. And tonight we are focused on the $78.32 million, which can be spent through September of 2024. So this is a 3-year spending plan. When considering the purpose and the use of our Esser funds, these are emergency relief funds intended to address the impact of the pandemic on elementary and secondary schools. The allowable uses are included in the Corona Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. The funds may take the place of state and local funds for allowable activities, and the full use, the list of allowable uses of Sr3 funds are articulated in Attachment D of Superintendent's Memo 11021, which was dated April 30th. The following allowable uses are specifically articulated in Attachment D of that Superintendent's Memo. At least 20% must be reserved to address learning loss among students. We can provide mental health services and supports, including through the implementation of full-service community schools. We can implement summer learning and supplemental after-school programs, and also repair and or improve facilities to reduce the risk of transmitting the virus and support student health. The Virginia Department of Education is requiring the following of all school divisions in regards to Esr 3. They must all post a plan for safe return to in-person instruction on their website. We did do that by June 1st. We are all to develop a spending plan in consultation with stakeholders and take into account public comment, which we're doing through this public hearing and through the Google form submissions that I mentioned. We're to post the plan by August 1st, which we did on July 30th. And finally, we must submit the Esr 3 application to the Virginia Department of Education by September 1st. Looking back at what we had previously funded in our Esr 1 and Esr 2 grant awards, we did purchase cleaning supplies, air filters, and personal protective equipment. We bought Chromebooks, hotspots for students, and expanded bandwidth. We added substitute teachers, classroom monitors, and clinic attendants. We hired new full-time reading specialists, counselors, and library assistants. We purchased instructional materials and library books that were lost during the pandemic. We bought new buses and minivans and funded a number of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning projects and security vestibules in some facilities. So shifting to the Esr 3 spending plan, we are allocating $4.5 million for a third year of funding for 58 positions that were initially funded through our Esr 2 grant. That includes 15 elementary reading specialists, 30 school counselors, and 13 library assistants. In the Esr 3 plan, we are also funding 8 positions for the virtual academy at the cost of $633,000. That includes a new psychologist and social worker, 2 teachers, an innovative learning coach, 2 attendance officers, and an office assistant. Shifting to capital projects, the largest portion of our Esr 3 grant award spending plan is for the Campus of Virginia Randolph project. About $60.5 million is going to be set aside for the design, construction, and furniture, fixtures, and equipment at that campus. It is listed as a need, but without a funding source in fiscal year 2023 of the county's approved capital improvement program. This project will increase community-based services for students and their families through a new community learning center hub. In particular, it will expand capacity for such high-demand programs as alternative education and exceptional education in a centrally located campus where social distancing requirements associated with the pandemic have made instruction all the more challenging. We are also setting aside about $482,000 for Highland Springs High School. We would establish a network refresh and phone system upgrade at that facility, have new paint, carpet, a set of bathrooms, and program divider doors. And this project also will increase community-based services for students and their families through the creation of a new community learning center hub. Shifting to some of our operating costs, the plan includes $275,000 for the repair and support of our one electronic device per student initiative. We've got $46,000 for startup costs for the virtual academy, another $120,000 to purchase and retrofit 3 community engagement vans, replacing Big Blue, and another $100,000 would go for outreach support and student and parent re-engagement. And finally, the plan will also include $3.2 million for summer school remediation, as the 2021 Summer Academy costs were covered by our Esr Award. We've included $2 million for 2 years of intensive tutoring remediation, and an additional $6.42 million that will provide one to 2 more years of pre-K through 12 literacy program materials and other intervention and instructional resources, which were initially funded through our Esr grant. In terms of the basic timeline, on April 30th, we received a notification from the Virginia Department of Education of the amount of our award and the requirements to submit an application. On June 24th, I provided an overview presentation for Esr. On July 30th, we did post the Esr spending plan on our website in English and Spanish and opened up for public written comment. On August 12th, today, we are holding a public hearing and soliciting more public input. And on August 26th, we'll be back before you to seek your approval of the Esr spending plan with any amendments. On September 1st, we do need to submit an application to the Virginia Department of Education. And after that point, we will be seeking a budget amendment to be introduced at a Board of Supervisors meeting, and it would have to be approved at a subsequent meeting after a public hearing due to the magnitude of the dollar amount. That is just a high-level overview of the spending plan. We are still compiling the public comment and can provide all those comments with the summary report next week to the school board.
All right, thank you. Now we'll hear from our those who have signed up. And Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you to hear from our.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wack. Thank you, Dr. Cashwell. Some citizens may have signed up in advance with the school board clerk. We will follow that list first and then allow anyone else who wishes to speak to do so after we have completed the list. We ask that each speaker come to the microphone, one to my left, your right, and clearly state your name and neighborhood or school affiliation. Once you finish speaking, we ask that you write your name and contact information on the sign-in form located on the table in the back of the auditorium, if you haven't already done so. Due to health concerns, hand sanitizer is provided. To assist you in tracking your time, there is directly in front of us 2 timekeeping systems on the platform of the stage. Speakers will have a 3-minute time limit. The light will be green as you begin your remarks. The yellow light means you have 1 minute remaining, and we ask that you stop speaking when the light turns red. The school board is here this afternoon to hear from you, the community. Speakers should speak directly to the school board. We will not be responding to you, but we will carefully consider your comments regarding the Esr spending plan. We're grateful and appreciative for your attendance here this afternoon, and as always, your advocacy and your input. The first speaker tonight signed up is Ms. Lisa Brown. Ms. Brown?
Oh, yes, I'm good. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chairman Cooper, my school board representative in Tuckahoe, Marcia Shea, Verina Representative Alicia Atkins, who represents the community of my former school assignment, Highland Springs High School, and other distinguished school board members. My name is L. Frances Brown, and I stand here today to represent parents, communities, and stakeholders who do not have a voice or a forum to share this message. I also stand here with the intersectionality of being a mother of 3 graduates of Henrico County Public Schools, a retired school psychologist in Psychological Service Department, and a concerned tax-paying citizen.
Over the last year and a half, I have given much thought, prayer, and consideration to the impact this pandemic has had on students, families, and diverse communities in Henrico County. Our students have experienced significant learning loss that in some way can never be recouped. Due to the inconsistent school year programming, students also have been negatively impacted by the loss of social and the emotional safety net that is intrinsic in school buildings, such as access to mental health services provided by the school psychologist, the school social worker, and the school counselor. It is my belief that literacy programs alone will be wholly ineffective without addressing secondary mental health issues. The issue of mental health in schools should be acknowledged, as well as a structured and collaborative system that needs to be adopted and implemented in Henrico. Students should not be expected to just pick up where they left off in March 2020 and start fresh and new for school year 2021-22. Reopening that includes basic health mitigation practices must also include mental health services. I ask this school board to give careful consideration to the use of the $78,318,248.87 to support mental health initiatives in schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Brown. Next, we will have Mr. Ray Beasley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Dr. Cashwell, esteemed leaders of our school district, and guests. I'm here basically to just say thank you. It's a privilege to live in the best school district in the state, led by the best team in the state. I trust that you'll do what's best in the best interest of our schools, and my prayer is that you just keep at the forefront Virginia Randolph. As a member of the Special Education Advisory Committee, we worked very hard to represent the board to make sure that special education was focused on and attended to. And based on some of the information that we saw up on the board, there seems to be a set aside, so the focus seems to be there. So I just want to say thanks in advance, and I'm looking forward to all the great things that are going to take place at Virginia Randolph. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Next, Ms. Samantha Davis.
Good evening, Dr. Cashwell and the school board. I'm Samantha Davis. You should know me because I'm here at every school board meeting and made presentations before you before. But I work in several capacities. I'm the parent of 5 children. They've all been through exceptional ed, 2 through the gifted program, who have both graduated. And my triplets, each of them have an IEP. I also work as a substitute in the elementary schools, and if I have time later, I'd like to address some of the issues when it comes to substitutes. But I'm here mostly because of the volunteer work I do. Currently, I'm the chair of SEAC, the Special Education Advisory Committee, and have served in for the past 2 years, and I've served in other leadership capacities for the last 7 years. I'm also one of the ex officio members of the Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee, and I currently serve on the Education Committee of the Henrico NAACP and was a member of the Executive Committee for the previous 2 years. The Education Committee of the NAACP is here today to ask you to fully fund the review of equity and parent engagement from September 2018, also known colloquially as the Ann Holton Report. So I just wanted to review what that was before other people got up and spoke about it. I know several of the board members were not members of the board when that process took place. So this report was commissioned by Superintendent Kinlaw and the county manager to study the racial disproportionality of placement, identification, and discipline in special education. While the investigative committee did talk with teachers, administrators, and parents. What you may not know is most of the work was based on the research done by and data collected by the SEAC, the Special Education Advisory Committee. We had previously presented all of these findings in our annual reports of 2016 through 2017. And I have copies of that and their supporting data if anybody needs to see that. Beginning that fall, I'm going to run out of time. Beginning that fall, there were special superintendent work groups made, and the SEAC members were chairs or co-chairs of each of those. And, well, I see I've run out of time, but I'll let other people talk about them. But they were in various stages when we last left off in 2019. And I know things with the budget sort of took a turn because of COVID, but I'm here on behalf of SEAC and the parents of special education students to ask that those findings be fully funded. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Next, Mr. Frank Callahan.
Yes, my name is Frank Callahan, and I am now the acting chairperson for the Henrico NAACP Educational Committee. And what I would like to do is, first of all, thank you for this presentation that you gave this evening. And I'm wondering if, based on the previous information that you have given us about where this money is going, is it possible for us to find out, A, how much of that money actually is going to fund this report from Ann Holt? B, how much of that money is also going to fund some of the resolution agreements that you have with the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights and the arguments that you have with them? And the third one is, how much of that funding is going to be going to rectify some of the problems listed in the Henrico Public Schools FFY 2019 Special Education Performance Report? And I think especially under that would be the emphasis on dropouts, students with disabilities of grades 7 through 12 who have dropped out, and we have not met the state targeted on that area. And the other area that I would like to see you emphasize and show us where the money is going for is, I was in public school for 36 years. I did an awful lot of work on dealing with education and working with staff members. And I would like to see how much more of this money is going to help the Henrico Schools Equity and Diversity Office, because I think that that office was created right after the short pump middle school problem, and I think that this is an organization that really needs full funding and support for all of the initiatives that we are talking about. And someone might say, well, this is a lot of money that we're talking about, and that is absolutely true. We are talking about millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. But in a recent article in the Henrico Citizen, it points out that the Henrico County Public Schools spend less per pupil on education in each of its 67 schools than the state average. And that actually Hanover, Chesterfield, and the city of Richmond spend more money per student than the city than Henrico County does. And in conclusion, I thought about how do I put together a conclusion that's positive and helpful. And I went back and I found a statement by the president of the Henrico NAACP in 2013. The goal of the NAACP is that every student of color receives a quality public education. This also means fair discipline, equitable resources, eliminating racial disparity, and the suspension and expulsion of students. We are looking forward to great results that this partnership will yield. And I would say that that same thing goes through today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, Ms. Fiona Bushnell. Ms. Bushnell.
Dr. Cashwell and school board members, I'm speaking as a parent of a student who was formerly placed at Virginia Randolph Education Center. I'm also a member of SEAC. My child was removed from the comprehensive school setting and placed at VREC for his own safety. This was several years ago. And then this in and of itself was a very traumatic time for our family. This population at Virginia Randolph is one of the most, if not the most, marginalized population in the district. And make no mistake, the children realized this when they first set foot on campus due to a variety of dilapidated and outdated conditions. My child had an episode on campus where he eloped. He ran through the playground and scaled the fence as a 5th grader of average height. When children are dysregulated, fight or flight kicks in, and the flight had most definitely kicked in. With that adrenaline rush, that made this all possible. Now, fortunately, a police officer who was quick on his feet was about 5 steps behind my child before he got to Mountain Road. 5 steps behind. Let's just let that sink in. How does our story end? Well, if you didn't already know, the gem and the heart and soul of this school is the supportive staff. But it shouldn't all be their responsibility. Fortunately, my child is in a much better mindset, headspace, and he has the opportunity for help and uses strategies because he got that chance from that police officer. What if it hadn't ended that way? Would you be willing to bet on the stride of 5 footsteps if it was your child? I understand that the county has made a few changes to the campus at Virginia Randolph, which are primarily cosmetic, as well as remediation of toxic lead paint. However, I implore you to dig deeper and to consider an absolute redesign of this facility or a new building altogether. Campus-style buildings have been deemed a security issue throughout the country. If it is not secure for a comprehensive setting, it is most certainly not safe for a child who has emotional concerns, as many of the students at Virginia Randolph do. I request a call to action to consider a single secure entrance to the building, as well as additional security measures and architectural features designed to promote positive behavioral supports. When we talk about keeping children safe, the first level of security is a secure building. Redundancies must be in place, so it isn't too close a call. It was too close a call. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Next, we'll have Monica Hutchinson.
Good evening, school board. I'm Monica Hutchinson. I am a proud resident of the Fairfield District here in Henrico County. I am also the mother of 3 amazing teenagers. My oldest just recently graduated from Hermitage High School. I am here representing Henrico NAACP Criminal Justice Committee. I'm the chair of that committee. And as such, for when it comes to funding and using this money, it is great to see what has already been done, but there's so much more that needs to happen. I will start out by saying that my oldest, just graduated Herm, is going to an HBCU. Recently told me has never had a Black teacher in Henrico County schools. Never. He chose an HBCU partly because of that very reason, because of not having a teacher, wanting to have that connection, wanting that representation. Representation does matter. Stanford study in 2018 found that intervening early on to increase a student's sense of belonging improves relationships with teachers and reduces disciplinary actions. For Black boys especially, by 57 to 65%. Closing the disparity gap by 75% with white students. And that effect goes from 6th all the way through 12th grade. Frank has mentioned the Ann Holton report from 2018. I'm asking that you fully fund that report. You fully fund the recommendations that were given by Ann Holton. When it comes to the disciplinary, the racial disparity gap, there is some really great recommendations in there that have not been funded or fully funded, and they should be, absolutely should be. We also need training for our teachers by outside resources. No offense, but we know that Henrico County needs to work on equity. I don't want Henrico County doing the equity training all the time. I want outside community resources to do so. We know we've got community resources that are more than willing to come in and partner with Henrico County Schools to do so. Henrico NAACP is one of those resources. When it comes to our special education, I serve with Samantha on special education on SEAC. We need one-to-ones. We need day treatment providers in our schools. I've heard many excuses as to why we don't have them, but we know that day treatment providers work for our sped kids. I know personally, my youngest in a different school district benefited him greatly. Henrico County, there's no reason why we don't have one-to-one day treatment. There's no reason why we don't have that resource, because that is, like I said, I know the value of it. And so, like, I will just say that I appreciate you having an equity, diversity, and opportunity department, but it's underfunded. It's underfunded and it's understaffed. And that's not fair to the community, it's not fair to the students, it's not fair to the families, and it's not fair to Dr. Manns. And so, therefore,
Thank you,
my
Ms.
last
Hutchins.
ask is to fully fund EDO. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. That exhausts our list of community members who signed up. If there's anyone else who did not sign up but you'd like to address the school board, please come one at a time at this time.
Thank you. Mike Taylor, a resident of the Brooklyn District and CEO of the Henrico Education Foundation. And I wanted to come and speak to you today. First say, Chairman Cooper, Dr. Cashwell, members of the board and colleagues and guests, good to be here with you this evening. I'm here to express my support for the district's use of Esser Funds to expand and strengthen the full-service community schools approach in Henrico, often referred to as a community learning center. As a parent of a recent Hcps graduate and 2 current students, and the CEO of the Henrico Education Foundation, I see the value that this initiative brings to schools to support families and strengthen communities. Esser highlights the use of funding for full-service community schools for a good reason, a track record of proven success with programs across the nation. Full-service community schools engage key partners to create a hub of services that address factors outside of the school day that impact student success. Here in Henrico, the strategy will include embedded health services and dental clinics, support for trauma-informed care, after-school enrichment, tutoring, and remediation services. Partners will include communities in schools, SCAN, VCU Dental School, Children's Hospital, and many others. Here's a recent example of how an embedded clinic would help. The Henrico Education Foundation provided funding this past year to cover non-COVID-related school vaccinations for financially disadvantaged students returning to in-person instruction. Many of these students were homeless or without insurance or access to a physician. Normally, the health department would serve these families, but long wait times due to COVID meant students would miss critical in-person instruction time in the classroom. HEF was happy to cover the cost of these vaccinations with local physicians, but this demonstrates just one type of need that would be served through school-based health clinics. This fall, the need to support students with unfinished learning will be greater than ever. Full-service community schools will offer critical support after the instruction day for tutoring, remediation, and enrichment, and will be a key support to close the learning gap for students as we return to normalcy. We fully support HCPS extending this strategy to the Academy at Virginia Randolph and Highland Springs High School. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Does anyone else like to speak? Is there anyone else that'd like to speak?
Mr. Chairman, if I might take a moment of privilege, since we don't have anyone approaching the microphone, to acknowledge Mr. Jesse Casey and a number of members of his team who are here this evening. I think we heard a very personal testament from a parent of a student who has attended there, and the powerful impact the staff and support team there have on individual students, countless students. And so I just want to acknowledge their presence here and thank them for all they do. Oh, I didn't say where he was from, and that I should have. The Academy of, the masks and the garb probably give away their spirit wear representing the campus of Virginia Randolph and the Academy of Virginia Randolph. We're so pleased to have you here.
Thank you, Ms. Casey, and your staff for being here. And to all of you all who came, thank you first of all for your presence, but also your participation and sharing with us your concerns and your ideas in regards to the dissemination of the funds. And I can speak on behalf of my colleagues as well as Dr. Cashwell and her staff when I say to you that we would definitely take into serious consideration your comments, your concerns, and your suggestions. That being said, this public hearing is adjourned.